A single act of kindness changed everything for him. The poor orphan boy, who only knew hunger and loneliness, would never have guessed that his small gesture would uncover a world he never knew existed. Kofi had always known the bitterness of hunger. His life had been shaped by the rough streets of the small town of Aqua, where the only thing more constant than the sun was the weight of his empty stomach. Orphaned at a young age, Kofi had never known the comfort of a mother's arms or the protection of a father's love. What he did know was survival. Each day, Kofi did what he could to earn a few coins or even just a meal, cleaning the market square, fetching water for the village women, or offering his help in the fields. Though poor, Kofi was a bright, kind-hearted boy, a trait that always seemed out of place in a world filled with greed and bitterness. Despite all the hardships, he never once complained. Instead, he offered a smile to everyone he met and walked with a quiet determination. One particular afternoon, as Kofi trudged along the dusty roads of Aqua, he noticed an old woman sitting by the side of the path. Her frail hands shook as she tried to lift a heavy bundle of firewood, her thin frame bent under the weight. The hot sun beat down mercilessly on her, and the sight of her struggle struck a chord in Kofi's heart. He had seen her before, though she was a stranger. She was always in the village, silently observing. Most of the villagers passed by without sparing her a glance, too absorbed in their own lives to care. But Kofi couldn't ignore her. His mother had always told him, even when you have nothing, you can still give. So, without hesitation, he dropped his own load of firewood and hurried over to her. "Let me help you, Mama," Kofi said gently, his voice full of sincerity. The old woman looked up, surprised at the offer. Her eyes, tired and clouded by age, softened as she looked at the boy who had spoken to her. "Thank you, child," she rasped, her voice faint, but warm with gratitude. "Not many would stop for an old woman like me." Kofi smiled, bending down to take the heavy bundle from her hands. "No one should be left alone," he said simply. "Where do you need to go?" The woman hesitated for a moment, as though considering something far beyond the simple request. Finally, she pointed down the road to a small hut nestled in the shadows of the trees. "Just a little further, son. You can leave me there." As Kofi helped her down the road, something strange seemed to shift in the air around them. The sun, harsh and unrelenting, seemed to soften, and the wind whispered through the leaves in a rhythm that almost felt like a sigh of relief. It was as though the very earth itself was acknowledging the kindness Kofi was offering. The old woman, though frail, walked with a strange strength in her step, and as they approached the small hut at the edge of the forest, she turned to Kofi with a glimmer of something unreadable in her eyes. "Child," she began, her voice almost imperceptible, "you have a heart like no other. A heart that will one day change this world." Kofi felt a strange chill run down his spine at her words. He wasn't sure what to make of them, but there was a heaviness in the air as if the ground beneath his feet had shifted in a way he didn't understand. The old woman smiled, and without another word, she led him inside her humble home. Inside, the air smelled of herbs and smoke, the walls lined with strange objects, stones, old carvings, and beads. It was nothing like the simple homes Kofi was used to. The room felt alive. He couldn't quite put it into words, but something about it was different. Almost magical. After setting down the firewood, the old woman motioned for him to sit. "Rest, my child," she said softly, as she placed a bowl of hot stew in front of him. "You've worked hard today." Kofi looked at the meal with surprise. He hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. The stew smelled delicious, rich with spices he had never tasted before. He dug in hungrily, and when he finished, the old woman handed him a small, intricately carved wooden box. "I want you to have this," she said, her eyes shining with an intensity that unsettled him. "This will show you the way when the time comes. You have already begun a journey, one that will lead you to a truth greater than anything you have ever known." Kofi blinked, confused. "What do you mean? What truth?" The old woman's smile deepened, but her gaze turned distant, almost as if she were speaking to herself. Sometimes, we are given gifts without understanding why. But everything has a purpose, child. You will see. With that, she rose from her seat and walked to the back of the room, leaving Kofi to stare at the box in his hands. It was small, no bigger than a loaf of bread, with intricate carvings of symbols Kofi didn't recognize. For a moment, he felt something stir inside him, something that whispered of secrets buried deep beneath the surface of the world. Kofi tucked the box under his arm, unsure of what it meant, but feeling an unexplainable pull to keep it close. He thanked the old woman and stood to leave, but before he reached the door, she stopped him with one final word. Remember, Kofi, kindness will always find its way back to you. But sometimes, it brings more than just a reward, it brings revelation. Kofi nodded, his mind racing. He had no idea what kind of revelation the woman was speaking of, but he knew one thing, his life had just changed forever. In his hands, Kofi held more than a mysterious wooden box, he held the key to a secret that could shatter everything he thought he knew about himself. But when the box opened, what would he find? Kofi couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in his chest as he walked back home that evening. The air had turned colder, and the usual sounds of the village seemed muffled, as if they were far away. His eyes constantly darted back to the small wooden box he held tightly in his hands. It had a weight to it, not just the physical weight of the object, but a deeper, more profound weight that seemed to press down on his very soul. What had the old woman meant by her words? Kindness will always find its way back to you, she had said. And yet, Kofi felt far from kind. He had helped her, yes, but was that enough to unlock some deeper secret? A part of him was unsure whether he was just imagining things or if he truly had been chosen for something greater. He had always known that life was unfair, he had known pain and suffering better than anyone his age, but the idea that he could be chosen for something meaningful was hard to grasp. When Kofi reached his small, humble hut on the outskirts of the village, the sky above him was darkening, with only the faint glow of the stars and the flickering light of his lantern to guide him. He stood at the doorway, staring at the box, still unsure what to do with it. His fingers traced the carvings on its surface, the unfamiliar symbols almost calling to him, urging him to open it. The door creaked as Kofi stepped inside. His heart still raced, his mind swirling with thoughts of the old woman, the kindness he had offered, and the cryptic warning she had given him. The room around him felt small and suffocating, the walls closing in on him. The same walls that had seen him through his lonely, desperate childhood. The same walls that had provided no comfort, no reprieve from his struggles. And yet, with the box in his hands, something felt different. His own humble existence suddenly seemed to shift, as though the very air around him had changed. Kofi sat on his mat, placing the box in front of him. It glowed faintly in the dim light of the room, casting long shadows against the walls. He hesitated, looking at it from every angle, wondering what lay inside. The old woman had said it was a key. A key to what? He could no longer ignore the feeling that had taken root in his chest, a gnawing sensation that told him opening the box was no longer optional. The time had come. With trembling hands, Kofi slowly unlatched the small wooden clasp and lifted the lid. The moment the box opened, a sharp, sudden gust of wind rushed through the room, causing the lantern to flicker. Kofi jumped, but before he could react, the room seemed to blur before his eyes. The air thickened, and the world around him seemed to shift, becoming darker, more distant. A faint glow emanated from within the box, so bright and intense that Kofi squinted, shielding his eyes. As his gaze fell upon the object inside the box, Kofi's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't gold, nor was it any material treasure he had expected. Instead, nestled within the box was a small, glowing stone. It shimmered with an otherworldly light, pulsating gently like a heartbeat. The stone seemed alive, its surface shifting between different shades of blue, purple, and green. Kofi felt a strange pull, an inexplicable connection to it, as though it was calling to him. His heart raced faster as he reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the smooth surface of the stone. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through his body. His chest tightened, and his vision blurred. For a moment, he could no longer feel the cold of the hut or hear the distant sounds of the village. The room around him dissolved, and he was transported to a place he had never been before. It was a vast, endless field, stretching far beyond the horizon. The wind was calm, and the air was thick with the scent of something ancient. In the center of the field stood a large stone structure, its surface covered in symbols like the ones on the box. The stone in Kofi's hand pulsed with a new intensity, its glow growing brighter. He didn't understand what was happening, but a voice, low and melodic, spoke inside his mind. The choice is yours, Kofi. The path you walk from here will determine everything. But first, you must understand who you truly are. Kofi spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but there was no one there. Only the distant hum of something ancient. His breath quickened, panic rising in his chest. What was this place? And why had the voice spoken to him? Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the field. It was a tall man, cloaked in shadows, his face obscured. But Kofi felt his presence as if the very air around him crackled with power. The man stood still, unmoving, waiting. You have been chosen, Kofi, the figure said, his voice deep, yet calm. You are not just a poor orphan boy. You are the heir to a power that has been hidden for generations. But this power comes at a cost. Your actions will shape the future of your people. Kofi stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. What do you mean? I'm just a boy. I don't want power. The figure stepped forward, his form becoming clearer with every movement. Power has found you, Kofi. And now, you must choose, will you accept the gift that has been given to you, or will you walk away from your destiny? The world will not wait for you to decide. Before Kofi could respond, the vision faded, and the room around him snapped back into focus. He was back in his hut, the stone still warm in his hand, but now, the air seemed heavier than before. The box was empty, and the whispers of the vision echoed in his mind. Kofi's mind raced. What had just happened? What did the figure mean by a power? And why had the stone chosen him? Kofi had made his choice, but the weight of the decision was more than he could have ever imagined. The ancient power within him stirred, but with it came a darkness, a shadow that had followed him from the very moment he opened the box. Now, he must face the true cost of his destiny, an enemy older than time itself. The next day, Kofi woke to a world that felt different, as if the very air around him had shifted. The stone in his hand pulsed with a rhythm that was almost alive, a steady heartbeat in the silence of his small hut. His thoughts kept returning to the figure in the vision, the cloaked man who had spoken of power, of ancient bloodlines and dark forces. He had chosen, but the consequences were far from clear. As he stepped outside into the early morning light, the village of Oz seemed the same, unchanged from the day before. The familiar scent of palm wine being tapped, the sound of laughter from children playing in the streets, the hum of daily life. Yet, for Kofi, everything felt different. The weight of the stone in his hand, the sense of responsibility that had settled into his bones, was a constant reminder that he was no longer just an orphan boy. The peacefulness of the village made the turmoil inside him feel all the more out of place. He had never asked for power, never sought it out. But the stone had chosen him, and now, he couldn't ignore the pull. He didn't understand it, but he felt the power within him growing stronger, more demanding with each passing hour. Kofi made his way to the village center, the stone still tucked carefully into his cloth. As he passed the familiar houses, the smiling villagers greeted him with their usual warmth, but Kofi couldn't help but feel like an outsider. They didn't know what he had seen, what had changed in him overnight. They couldn't possibly understand. His thoughts were interrupted when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find his best friend, Kwaku, approaching with a concerned expression on his face. "Kofi, you look different," Kwaku said, raising an eyebrow. "What's going on? You've been acting strange since yesterday." Kofi swallowed hard, unsure of how to explain the storm raging inside him. How could he tell Kwaku that he had seen a vision, that he was holding a power that could change the world? How could he explain the weight of the choice he had made? "It's nothing," Kofi lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." Kwaku didn't look convinced, but he didn't press the issue. "Well, if you need anything, I'm here," he said, clapping Kofi on the shoulder before walking away. But Kofi couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was waiting, just beyond the edge of his vision. Later that day, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Kofi sat alone by the edge of the forest, the stone resting in his lap. The village was quiet now, the sounds of daily life replaced by the chirping of insects and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The stone's pulse seemed to resonate with the rhythm of the world around him, each beat matching the beat of his heart. Kofi had been drawn to this spot, the same place where he had helped the old woman days before. It felt like a crossroads, a place where his life had taken a turn he couldn't reverse. He needed answers, but he didn't know where to turn. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the distance. Kofi stood quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for the stone, as if it could offer him protection. A figure emerged from the trees, and Kofi's heart skipped a beat. It was the old woman. But this time, she was different. Her clothes were darker, more elegant, as though she had been transformed. The frail, weak woman Kofi had helped no longer stood before him. Instead, a powerful figure filled the clearing, her presence radiating authority and grace. Her eyes, once tired and full of the weight of age, now gleamed with a sharp, unsettling light. "You've come," she said, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable strength. "I knew you would." Kofi took a cautious step back, his breath quickening. Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear and confusion. The woman smiled, and for a moment, her face softened with a hint of kindness. "I am the one who has been waiting for you, Kofi. I am the keeper of the secrets that lie buried in your bloodline. And now, you must choose. Will you embrace the power within you, or will you turn away from your destiny?" Kofi's heart raced. "I don't want power. I never asked for it," he said, his voice desperate. "I just want to live a normal life." The woman's eyes darkened. "Normal? There is no normal for someone like you. You are part of a legacy that stretches back generations. The power that lies within you is older than time itself. It has shaped the course of history, and now, it will shape your future." Kofi shook his head, trying to understand. "I don't understand. I'm just a poor boy. I have nothing. What am I supposed to do with this power?" The woman stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "The question is not what you can do with it, Kofi. The question is what you will do with it. The power is yours to wield, but it comes with a price. You must face the darkness that is coming. A shadow from your past, from your bloodline, that seeks to control the power you've awakened." Kofi's pulse quickened. "What shadow? What do you mean?" The woman's expression turned grim. "A dark force is already watching you. It has seen the potential within you and seeks to use it for its own gain. But you, Kofi, have the chance to change everything. You have the chance to rewrite the future." Kofi stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had already made a choice by opening the stone, by accepting the power that lay within it. But he hadn't fully understood what that choice meant. The burden of it all was too much to bear. "I'm not ready," he whispered, his voice filled with fear. "I can't do this." The woman's face softened, and for a moment, her gaze was filled with something almost like pity. "You were never meant to be ready, Kofi. That is the nature of power. It finds you when you least expect it, and it forces you to make a choice. The world is on the brink of change, and your choices will decide whether it thrives or falls into darkness. With those words, the woman turned and began to walk away, vanishing into the shadows of the trees. But before she disappeared completely, she spoke once more. The test has already begun, Kofi. And soon, you will face the darkness. You will know what it means to truly choose. The weight of the world was on Kofi's shoulders, but the choice he was about to make would either destroy everything or give him the power to reshape destiny itself. The storm of his bloodline was about to break, and only one truth remained: embrace it or perish under its weight. The following day, Kofi found himself standing at the edge of the village, staring out at the horizon. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the land. The air felt thick with the weight of what he had learned. The woman's words echoed in his mind: you are the key. The power within him was real. The darkness that had been stirred, ancient and terrifying, now felt closer than ever. And the question of whether he could control it, or whether it would consume him, loomed like a storm cloud hanging over his life. The weight of the stone he carried seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. Its pulse, which had once been a faint rhythm, now beat like the heart of the earth itself. It was as if the very ground he walked on was alive, resonating with the power he held in his hands. The legacy of his bloodline, the ancient power he had uncovered, was more than he had ever imagined. As he walked back into the village, he couldn't help but notice how everything seemed unchanged, yet everything had changed. The familiar faces of the villagers, the sounds of children playing, the rhythmic tapping of palm wine, all of it felt distant, as though he was no longer a part of this world. He wasn't just a poor orphan anymore. The stone in his hands had marked him. And with it, he had unknowingly invited something far more dangerous into his life. Kofi's thoughts were interrupted when he heard a voice calling his name. It was Kwaku, his best friend, rushing toward him with a concerned look on his face. Kofi. I've been looking for you, Kwaku said, his voice laced with worry. You've been distant lately. What's going on? You haven't been yourself. Kofi tried to force a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm fine, Kwaku, he said, his voice strained. Just trying to figure things out. Kwaku narrowed his eyes, clearly unconvinced. You're not fine. I know you too well. Something's wrong. You've been acting strange since that old woman came into the village. I don't know what happened, but I can feel it. You're carrying something heavy, Kofi. Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone. Kofi felt a pound of guilt. Kwaku had always been there for him, and yet, he couldn't bring himself to explain what was happening. How could he? How could he tell Kwaku that he was holding the power of generations, a force that could reshape the world, but that it also came with a cost he wasn't sure he could pay? I'll be alright, Kofi said, his voice a little firmer now. I just need some time. I'll come around. Kwaku didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press further. Just remember, Kofi, he said, his tone serious, no one is ever truly alone. Not as long as we have each other. As Kwaku walked away, Kofi stood there for a moment, watching his friend disappear into the crowd. The weight of the stone felt heavier in his hands, and for the first time, he felt the true cost of the power he had chosen. Later that night, as the village settled into quiet, Kofi sat alone in his small hut. The fire crackled softly in the corner, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The stone sat in front of him on a cloth, its glow faint but steady. Kofi's thoughts were consumed by the choice before him. The woman had told him that he was the key. But to what? To power. To destruction. Could he control it? Could he be the one to wield it for good, or would the darkness that had been awakened consume him? A sudden chill swept through the room, and Kofi shivered. The stone paused again, a steady rhythm that seemed to beat in time with his heart. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cool surface of the stone. As his fingers made contact, a vision flashed before his eyes. In the vision, Kofi stood in a vast, desolate land. The sky was dark, filled with swirling clouds that crackled with energy. The earth beneath him trembled, and the wind howled, carrying with it the scent of decay. He was surrounded by a group of figures, cloaked in shadow. Their faces were hidden, their forms barely visible in the darkness. "You have come," a voice said, hollow and cold. Kofi tried to speak, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. He reached out, his hand trembling, but the figures seemed to pull away from him, as though they were being consumed by the darkness. "The power you seek will destroy you, Kofi," the voice whispered. "It will devour everything you love." Kofi tried to scream, but the words caught in his throat. The figures began to circle him, their presence suffocating, their cold eyes watching him with silent judgment. The storm grew louder, and Kofi felt his body weaken, the power within him threatening to tear him apart. Suddenly, the vision shifted, and Kofi found himself standing in front of a glowing doorway. Beyond it, he could see a bright, golden light. It was a vision of peace, of hope, of everything he had ever wanted. But the doorway was closed, and the only way to open it was to face the darkness that stood before him. Kofi jolted awake, gasping for breath. His heart raced in his chest, and sweat coated his skin. The vision had felt so real, so vivid. But what did it mean? What was the darkness that he had seen? And why did the doorway to hope seem so far out of reach? He looked at the stone, still pulsing with its steady rhythm. The answer, he realized, was within his grasp. But so was the darkness. And the path ahead was one he could not walk alone. Kofi stood in the heart of the storm, his chest heaving with every breath. The relic in his hand strummed with energy, its glow brighter than ever. The power it held was unimaginable, but the weight of that power pressed down on him like 1,000 boulders. His mind raced, unable to escape the conflict raging within him. Every choice he made, every decision he took, now had consequences not just for himself but for everyone he cared about. The wind howled, the trees swaying violently, their branches snapping under the pressure. Lightning flashed across the sky, casting an eerie light over the village of Or, as though the heavens themselves were watching, waiting for him to choose. Standing at the precipice of destiny, Kofi glanced down at the stone in his hand. The relic was more than just an object. It was a symbol of his bloodline, a testament to the power that had been passed down through generations. It was the key to unlocking the true potential of his people, the key to changing the future. But it was also the key to destruction, to chaos, to a darkness that threatened to consume everything in its wake. The storm inside him raged with every beat of his heart, and Kofi could feel the tension tightening in his chest. His mind flashed back to the moments that had brought him here. The day he found the relic. The day he made the choice to embrace his destiny. The trials he had faced, the sacrifices he had made. And now, the final trial stood before him. His legs felt like lead as he took a step forward, the ground beneath him shifting and trembling, as though the earth itself was responding to the power he had unlocked. He could feel the pull, the law of the darkness, but he could also feel something else, a sense of purpose, of clarity, rising from deep within him. The storm outside seemed to intensify, but within Kofi, there was a calm. His heart, once conflicted and torn, was now steady. The truth he had sought, the power he had unlocked, had transformed him in ways he could not have anticipated. He had come too far to turn back now. The choice had already been made. It was time to see it through. With one final breath, Kofi raised the relic above his head. The light from within the stone seemed to pulse with his heartbeat, the energy swirling around him like a whirlwind. The world seemed to stand still as the air grew thick with anticipation. The storm outside mirrored the storm within him, but he knew that it was no longer about fighting the darkness. It was about controlling it. It was about embracing the power that lay within him without letting it consume him. "I choose," Kofi whispered to the night, his voice strong, unwavering. "I will face what comes. I will walk the path ahead." As if on cue, the storm around him began to subside. The winds eased, the sky cleared, and the earth beneath his feet grew steady once again. The relic in his hands paused one last time, then the glow faded, leaving only the warmth of its energy lingering in his palms. Kofi stood alone in the silence that followed, the weight of the power he had unlocked settling deep within him. He could feel the presence of his ancestors around him, their spirits watching, waiting. They had passed down this power to him, and now it was his responsibility to wield it. His journey had only just begun. As he turned to face his village, the first rays of dawn began to break through the darkness, casting a soft light over the land. The storm had passed. The future was his to shape. The villagers would know the truth. They would know the power that had been hidden for so long. And they would understand that Kofi, the boy who had once been lost and broken, had become the man who could change everything. He didn't need to explain. His actions would speak for him. His choices, his sacrifice, would be the legacy he left behind. And as he walked back toward his village, the relic still glowing faintly in his hands, Kofi knew that the path ahead would be filled with both challenges and triumphs. He was ready to face whatever came next, for he had made the final choice, he had embraced his destiny. The sun rose higher in the sky as Kofi returned to his village, the weight of the relic still heavy in his hands. The villagers, curious and hopeful, awaited his return. They had seen the storm, felt its fury, and now they saw the calm that followed. The boy who had once been lost had returned a man, carrying with him the power to shape their future. Kofi stood at the center of the village, the relic now a symbol of hope, of transformation. The choices he made would echo through the generations to come. The power he had unlocked was not just for him, it was for everyone. And as the villagers gathered around him, their eyes filled with awe and wonder, Kofi knew one thing for certain: the storm was over, but the journey had just begun. The power of his bloodline would live on, not as a curse, but as a gift that would shape the future of his village and the world beyond. And with that, the world would never be the same again.